Bonnie Ghani, everyone. This is Professor Rahh, along with his co-host, historian Joe Hembrick, and we have a very, very important and exciting show this evening. First of all, I'm Professor Emeritus, California State University of Long Beach Africana Studies Department, former city councilman for the city of Compton, former Compton College Board of Trustees, and former Compton Unified School District Board of Trustees, along with historian Joe Hembrick, longtime educator and an educator activist, as well as the first Black head football coach for Linwood School District, as well as an administrator for the Compton Unified School District, and a historian that got most of his material of his study of his re-education from the miseducation that Carter G. Woodson say we all got. He says that he got most of his education from SO1 bookstores and various libraries throughout the LA. We want to welcome also Brother Rashid Maskani, the platform that lets us go on to this show with regards to Community Education Network. We want to thank him, along with Sister Linda out of Florida, a longtime organizer, writer, doing excellent work on the history of Black people inventions that contribute to the betterment of all life in health and in technology. Along with Mashinda out of Louisiana, longtime activist and working with young people, and along with Dr. Shabazz, Let's Make It Happen, longtime educator, counselor for the Compton Unified School District, but board member for Black Women Wellness out of Leimert Park, and she's on the line too. Today we have one of LA's, I'd say, outstanding scholars, community organizer, longtime activist, Dr. Anthony Abdullah Samad, author. He's currently the director of the Merv Diamond African American Political Science Institute. But above all, he's an activist, longtime contributor to our liberation as a people, has put on many think tanks and discussion groups, as well as, I said, a well-known author, one of the most respected individuals in the movement for Black consciousness and awareness. So we are just excited to have Dr. Abdullah, Dr. Anthony Samad. He's a good friend of mine. I've been knowing him and his work for years, and I've admired everything that he's done. And really, I keep up with him in many ways that I can. So we're just happy to have him here. We're going to let him get started. We put the title, The Ballot of the Bullet, but like I told him, he can deal with an analysis of the recent 2020 election, or his perspective of where Black people are in accordance with the Merv Diamond African American Political Science Institute. He can tell us about that and how it got started. He has so much he can talk about. I'm just telling you, he's one of the well-known persons and activists that we have in our area, and we're blessed to have him in Southern California. So Dr. Anthony, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Rahh, and all of the other co-hosts. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to come and speak on your platform. I'm Dr. Anthony Abdullah Samad. For the last 5 years, I've been the director of the Mervyn Diamond African American Political Economic Institute, which is a Black think tank that was started by Mervyn Diamond when he went back to the assembly at the age of 76. The first thing he did in 2002 when he got back to the assembly was recognize that African Americans in the African American community needed a think tank because they couldn't discern the impact of public policy until it was long after it had affected them. And so when he started the think tank, it was called the California African American Political and Economic Institute. Then when he passed away in 2012, then State Senator Curran Price, who was the head of the Legislative Black Caucus, put in legislation to rename the Institute after Mervyn Dimely. And so what we currently do is we basically collect and document and archive the history of African Americans in California since 1850, since California became a state. One of the things that we recognize is that our communities are losing institutional memory at a very rapid pace. They can't tell you who did what 10 years ago. You can attribute it to short attention spans associated with social media. You can attribute it to the decline in many education venues. But the bottom line is our people are losing sight of our history, while history makers are alive. So we basically have several digital archive projects. We've done a documentary on the life of Mervyn Dimely because many people don't know who Mervyn Dimely was. Excuse me. We also did our first historical erasure recovery project. And this is a project that looks at history that has been lost or forgotten. And we contributed to the documentary on the life of Raymond Lewis, who was a Watts phenomenon that basically put Vernon Day High School on the map. And 50 years ago, he set the world on fire. Everything that Allen Iverson does and Steph Curry does, Raymond Lewis was doing in 1969, 1970, 71, 72. And we talk about how Raymond Lewis was blackballed from the NBA, largely because he went in to negotiate without representation. That movie took 15 years to be made. They started that movie right after his death in 2004. And by the time we got involved at the Dimely Institute in 2019, the project was dead and we revived the project. And so that project is currently streaming on Amazon Prime and iTunes. We have a project that will be released next year on the history of African American women in politics in California, and it's called Respect My Crown. And that is going to be a dynamic film. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is to preserve African American history. We also engage in public discourse. Dr. Rahh mentioned, the 20 years of the Urban Issues Forums that I hosted. Well, we still do issues forums at Dominguez Hills. We just don't do them on a monthly basis. But we do annual symposiums, Millennial and Gen Z Symposium, as well as an Ageism Symposium, which we had our third one last Thursday. And then we bring in distinguished speakers. We brought in Angela Davis. We brought in Cornel West, Michael Eric Dyson, Eddie Glaude. Those have been our distinguished speakers. Our next distinguished speaker will actually be a white woman by the name of Robin DiAngelo. She currently has a couple of books on New York Times bestseller. She's the author of White Fragility, and her current book is called Nice Racism, talk about how progressive whites could continue the perpetuation of racism. So that's what we do on the academic side, in addition to research. We have two research projects. We are currently finishing up a public policy study on Prop 64, which is recreational marijuana. And we got awarded $1.8 million for that research project that studies recreational marijuana use in the South Bay region. And it really talks about the failures of Prop 64 in terms of it contributing to the criminalization and the monopolization of cannabis. We also have a study that will be, the Los Angeles County will be releasing this month or next. It's supposed to be released before the end of 2022 on the state of Black Los Angeles, talking about how the African-American community is in retrogression. We're currently in a state of retrogression, not just in Los Angeles, but nationally. We're going backwards economically. We're going backwards educationally. We're going backwards health-wise. Everybody else's health mortality is advancing. Ours is regressing. And we need to look at what are these causes, despite having the most educated and articulate generation of Blacks, the last two generations. Why are we in this state of retrogression? And then we mentor the next generation of civic and political leaders called the Donnelly Fellows. This year, we had the opportunity to take them to Ghana. Our next group of fellows will be going to South Africa in July of 2023. So that's pretty much what we do at the Donnelly Institute. You want me to go right into elections?
Yes.
Well, despite our retrogression, the one thing that we continue to do is to engage in voting, civic engagement. We outmaneuver most of our other segments of the population in terms of our imprint on the political system, despite only being, 14% of the national population, 14% of the state population, and 8% of the county population. We're about to elect our first female mayor of the city of Los Angeles. The last batch that was released today, Karen Bass, is up by 29,000 votes. So she has essentially increased her lead in the last 4 dumps, and the rest of the votes are going to trend that way. We believe she will be our next mayor of Los Angeles. But we're also looking, at women increasing their position throughout the Southland. Holly Mitchell beat Herb Wesson by 100,000 votes, which was absolutely unheard of. When 30 years ago, Yvonne Burke and Diane Watson was in a close race in which, 2,500 votes separated the two amongst 2 million votes. So the next generation has stepped up. We'll have a new Congresswoman, Sidney Kamlanger, who came off of the Los Angeles Community College District Board to run for the state assembly. And then she ran for state senate. And now she will be replacing Karen Bass as our Congresswoman in the 35th. There are some critical ballot initiatives taking place, throughout the state as well as the city to try to address this issue of homelessness and unhoused populations, because everybody's not homeless. Some folks just choose not to live in a house, and so we have to address that. And so we have a significant cadre in the California Legislative Black Caucus, as well as our local elected officials that are on point on this issue. So I don't know what else you want me to talk about. You can go ahead and move into Q&A if you like.
Okay, well, they just announced that Hobbs won Arizona.
Okay.
And Black people and Native Americans, we central in that vote in Arizona, in turn in getting the state senator and the governor, and possibly a congressperson. I haven't gotten that, but that's very essential. We help. But Anthony, I'm gonna just ask the group first, and then I generally go after that. Linda, you have any questions?
No, I'm just interested in hearing what he has to say. But my only question is, can you repeat what you said about Tom Joyner did what? He's doing what?
Tom Joyner.
I didn't say anything about Tom Joyner.
It's my connection. I just heard the word name Joyner. I was trying to hear what you said. Repeat whatever you said about somebody Joyner.
Doing what?
Well, I talked about Karen Bass, and I talked about Sidney Kamlanger and Holly Mitchell. I don't recall talking about Tom Joyner.
Yeah. And you talked about a lady that's taking Karen Bass place.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me, it's my ear. I had a bad connection. Sorry.
All right, then. Sister making it happen, Dr. Shabazz. You have any questions?
Good evening, everyone. Greetings, Hotep family. What an honor to have such a great, distinguished guest among us speaking. And so the question that I would like to have is more of a comment, not a question. Holly Mitchell was part of influential in getting the Crown Act going. And I know you mentioned women stepping up and taking active roles. And I want to just acknowledge and congratulate the effort that in getting the Crown Act passed and acknowledging all the work that she's been doing in the community.
Yeah, she is the leader on that one because the rest of the states followed. As California goes, sometimes so goes the rest of the nation. And that's in particular because identity is important to all of us. And for the longest, we oftentimes were discriminated against and actually held out of the workplace because we chose to express our cultural identities in the workplace. And so, you know, that was a great victory, not just for African Americans, but for anybody else who wants to express our cultural identity in the workplace.
So that's about your hair, and they couldn't fire you because of your hair or make you change. Is that what?
Right. Right. No discrimination against your hair and the way you wear your hair. So I was really proud for braids, locks, just natural hair. Again, just really proud of the work that she continues to do. And yes, it does light a fire and go global. So she is definitely showing out as a sister.
Okay. Any other questions, Dr. Sabah?
No, I like everything that the brother is talking about. I know that we need to be aware of all the local ballots and local initiatives and things that are coming up because it's really important for our people to be at the table. This is our time. Again, we need to be present because decisions have to be made that's affecting us at the local level and at all levels.
All right. What about you, Mashinda?
No, I don't have any questions. Just want, like I say, I want to thank the guest for spending time tonight. I'm sure he's a busy man, but to come on tonight is a treat, you know, and I'm just all ears. He mentioned some names, you know, Yvonne Burke, Brathwaite, and Diane Watson, and all those fighters, you know, back in the day. My dad was friends with Merv Diamond back in the day, you know, years ago. And I just want to thank you for coming on. I'm just like to say, I might have some questions or comments.
My pleasure. I appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate the invitation.
All right. Brother Hembrick, historian Hembrick.
Oh, yeah. Evening, brother. How you doing? Appreciate your presentation. I had a couple of questions. I'm not sure if Brother Dimley was the one that did the legislation that put Compton School District under receivership. Am I correct, or is that different?
No, that was somebody else. He did Compton College.
Okay.
He actually did it and then helped get them out of receivership, if I recall correctly. Dr. Rahh, you can correct me if I'm wrong. There was a different kind of state politic going on at that time that did not want Compton College to operate in autonomy. And basically it was targeted at the political leaders, the board of trustees. And so the state kind of held the district hostage until those board members were put out, and then decided to return the district to autonomy over a period of time. And while it was under a receivership of El Camino College, but that was more politics than anything else.
Next question. I didn't get all that you were saying about Proposition 64 and what the position is with the Black think tank or whoever was involved with that.
I said we got awarded a research project in 2020 to study the impact of Prop 64, which is the recreational cannabis policy. So California, basically, that policy has been a failure largely because California tried to follow the Colorado model and only looked at the upside and didn't look at some of the other impediments that has caused the policy to fail. One of them being overtaxation, and then the other being the inundation of retailers selling the product. We hadn't seen that kind of inundation since liquor stores, 50 years ago. But the bottom line is they didn't properly regulate it. The state wanted to tax, then the county wanted to tax, the cities wanted to tax. Most of the smaller beach cities decided not to participate at all, which then forced others into areas that were really in the South Bay. There's only two, Long Beach and Los Angeles. And they didn't have the capacity to regulate it properly. So we've been 2 years into that study.
I hope they need to be studying that doggone alcohol things that is causing in society. That stuff causes more than all drugs combined, in my opinion.
Well, they banned alcohol until they figured out how to tax it. And that's the same that's going on right now with marijuana. It was illegal until they figured out how to tax it. Now they have overtaxed it. And so the likelihood is you will see some changes in cannabis policy over the next 3 years. Because the underground economy basically has sunk the policy.
Right. All right.
Okay. Brother Rashaki?
Just listening at the moment. If I have something, I'll ask a little bit later. Appreciate you being here, Dr. Samad.
Thank you, my brother.
All right. Dr. Samad, I got a few questions. First of all, I want to say, again, they couldn't have selected a better person to be over the Institute.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that.
I work with Merv close. I still have his letters of recommendation for me, jobs, and his endorsement for me for city council, for Congress and city council. Me and him was real close. He's one of the only Black politicians that came up to see me when I was in captivity on them trumped up charges. He was the only one that came and testified in our favor at our court hearing. Everyone else just accepted what the white folks were saying.
Right.
But Merv went in there and told them they was wrong. They ain't got them doing this. He said every politician do what they do. They had approval from the city manager. I mean, he did a great job. I got the transcript of his testimony. And his birthday's on the same birthday as mine, May 12th.
Okay.
You understand? And his daughter Lynn, we was on school board together. But the question I have is, could you just give us a list of some of the books you've authored, writings, articles?
Well, in terms of the articles, between the lines, I wrote 1,163 articles over a 25-year period from 1991, and I stopped writing the column in 2015. I still will write one every now and then, but I stopped writing the weekly column. My first book was Souls for Sale, The Diary of an Ex-Colored Man. That came out in 2002, okay? And that was basically an autobiographical story on my civil rights advocacy in the 1980s as the youngest president of the Los Angeles NAACP. My second book was called 50 Years After Brown, The State of Black Equality in America. And actually, that was an excerpt of my dissertation work. When I went to get my PhD at Claremont, it was around that time that folk were talking about that Brown versus the Board of Education was a failure. And so my doctoral dissertation was a 50-year case study on Brown, the policy implementation challenges of Brown that basically documented where Brown was allowed to proceed or desegregation occurred, then educational systems were a success. Where there was massive resistance or desegregation was not allowed to proceed, then yes, Brown did fail in those areas. You know, we had whole states, the state of Virginia closed their school system down for 5 years, you know, to keep from integrating with Black students. And so the dissertation was 1,000 pages. So my dissertation chair cut it down to pretty much close to 500 pages, under 500 pages. So I took the other half and published it. And it basically represented a history from Brown to 2000 at the turn of the millennium as to what Blacks had been dealing with, not just in education, but as it relates to economic subjugation, which is currently still persistent. The income gaps and the wealth gaps are every bit as what they were in 1865. We're still 3/5 of what white folk make. We're really only 10% of what white folk own. And so, that book discussed that. My third book was a book called Saving the Race, which was a book of affirmations for young Black males. That book came out in 2008. Okay. My fourth book was called Realize Race, Reality, and Politics in the 21st Century. That book came out in 2012. And that basically talked about how America was looking at the world, and our communities in particular, was looking at the world through an outdated prism. The 20th century prism was not working in the 21st century. So we saw a lot of things return, hypersexuality, racial microaggressions. We saw exploitation of athletes, this thing that's going on currently with Kyrie, we call buck breaking. Remember they did the same to Michael Vick for fighting dogs, and then when Tiger had his crisis, even though he built the sport, when Tiger came on the scene, they had $2 million purses. Now the last place finisher gets $1 million. That was the Tiger effect. And so we talked about all of those things and Realize and how we had to look at the world through a more updated world view or point of view. My fifth book was a book called March On, Ye Mighty Host. My fraternity, Phi Beta Sigma, celebrated its centennial in 2014. And I was blessed to be selected to write the centennial history book, which was the comprehensive 100-year history of the fraternity. Okay. And then a book that will be coming out at the end of the year, my 6th book, is a table book on the 20 years of the Urban Issues Forum called Black People Won't Get Up in the Morning. The advent of urban public discourse. When we started the Urban Issues Forum, everybody used to say, "Brother, why you had a forum so early? Why have them in the morning?" You know, my sponsors were saying, Black people don't get up in the morning, but we had the largest forums. We had larger forums than town hall, and one of the highlights of the forum, we were first to bring Barack Obama into a public space in August of 2006. And I was told by several people, including a congresswoman that's still serving, that if I brought Barack Obama to Los Angeles, I'd never do anything again because everybody had already staked the deck for Hillary. I bought him back 3 times. Okay. So that is part of the experience of leading. They didn't think that Black folk could intellectually engage on a serious basis, which is why white politicians and policymakers and thought leaders don't come into our community. They think they're going to be attacked. So the urban issues demonstrated that folk of intellect and folk who were well read, who get up in the morning and discourse with the best of them.
Excellent. The other question is on this movie about Raymond Lewis, who was white bald. I got a chance to play against.
I got
Raymond.
it.
I got to play. I got a chance to play against him during the summer league pro-am at Cal State LA. When I got out of college, he was one of the best shooters that ever played the game.
Right.
I mean, he got 50 points on Cal State Long Beach when I was coaching. And so I was assistant coach at head coach for junior varsity. I mean, freshman. But I knew Raymond very well, him and a couple other players. What's the name of the movie that's on streaming? Do you know the name?
It's called LA Legend, Raymond Lewis.
And it's on Amazon.
It's on Amazon Prime, that's correct.
Yeah, right. Okay. So you can put it in search if it's not being in the major things and it should come up.
Well, yeah, you just put in LA Legend and it'll come up.
Okay, then. All right, I'm gonna watch it. The other thing is, in this past election, people were talking about, a lot of the Trump people who were election deniers have lost a lot of races. And Democrats are saying, we did good. But my understanding, there was 267 deniers running for office. And 167 did get elected. So I want to get your analysis of the relevancy of this election, because some people are arguing that now people are paying more close attention to Secretary of State, which we have Dr. Shirley Weber, sister from San Diego,
right,
who was a 70-person state senator. Now she was appointed Secretary of State, then she just won her office. How significant how important is political education in the Black community? And and how you gauge it?
Well, first of all, it's very important, and of course I'm speaking from a political scientist bias, but having served in public office, when elections come around, voters are inundated with information overload. And a lot of times they don't know what to believe. Voter education actually starts when there are no elections. Help people understand the context of why people are running, who is running, who's actually done a good job, who hasn't, you know, because let's use this current election cycle as an example. Rick Caruso spent $100 million to try to take out Karen Bass. That's an unimaginable number. You know, the only reason what he did was use the Dick Reardon model. Dick Reardon bought the office after Tom Bradley, and then basically used it to enrich his friends. Well, Rick Caruso was about to do the same thing, and he spent all 100 million of it hammering on probably one of the most righteous sisters we know. She comes out of, you know, an organizing community activist community with Founding Community Coalition. She closed down over 200 liquor stores by herself. Okay, Karen Bass. But because most people didn't know either one of them, you know, negative news travels faster than positive news. And so, you know, she only spent $8 million. And at the end of the day, the message got out. Okay. So voter education is extremely important. Voter turnout was only 26% in Los Angeles. Los Angeles County has 5 million voters and only 1.3 million voted. You know, so, you know, when you default from the system, whether you like the system or not, the system makes a lot of decisions about our life. And when you default, then you become irrelevant. Then you don't really have a reason to complain about anything if you didn't participate. We need to have greater conversations about civic responsibility. This democracy does not run on autopilot. It runs by those who gas it and fuel it. And so if the folk who are making the most noise are getting the government to go in its direction, then everybody else who remains silent is just along for the ride. And so, you know, I'm a big advocate of, you know, civic engagement training, because remember, when we were coming through elementary school, junior high school, Rahh, they taught civics. Well, they took civics out of the schools about 40 years ago in the mid-1980s. And the first time any of our youth know anything about politics is in a high school government class around the 11th grade, but they really don't get much there. So if they don't elect to go to community college or to a four-year university, they really never get a training on what civics is about and civic engagement is about. And I think that we're stuck in a mode now where we pay attention to reactionary politics. I call them community reactionists. You can't react to everything that folk put out there, you know. Thank God we got rid of him, but 2 elections ago or 3 elections ago, you know, they had now we know how brutal LA County Sheriff is. And we had a reform-minded sheriff in Jim McDonald that didn't do everything that, you know, certain folk wanted him to do. So they put him out, and we ended up getting Villanueva, who was worse than him. You know, I think the same happened with Jackie Lacey. You know, I don't think this guy who's district attorney, you know, is where he said he was when he was trying to get elected. There's a reason they ran him out of San Francisco, you know. And so if we're dealing with an underformed electorate and we're dealing with massive anti-intellectualism, that's what we're really dealing with. We're dealing with a lot of people who don't know who are speaking or claiming they're speaking for the masses. That's enough to take the community backwards.
Now, this proposition in the county that will give the Board of Supervisors the power to fire or to get an elected official out of office if he violates certain laws or don't adhere to certain commissions. How do you feel about that? I have an issue with it, you know.
Well, let me say this again. You know, bureaucrats don't always get it right. What they should have did was put a ballot initiative on the ballot that says that the sheriff can become an appointed office. Okay, and he would report to the Board of Supervisors. What they were trying to do is create a check and balance system, but the county is unique. The county is the second most, county supervisor, the second most powerful position in the United States, okay, to president of the United States. And this is why. It's because they serve as executive and legislative at the same time, okay? They make the law and then they implement the law. And so this is an instance in which they were trying to regulate one of their executives who was elected by the people, you know, who just had kind of stepped all the way out there, okay? And so the way they felt best to reel him in is to try to make an elected official report to the County Board of Supervisors, almost in a way in which you can kind of sanction other officers. City council can sanction the mayor, vice versa. And so when we say, you know, that he is one and they are five, what they're really doing is taking away some of the power of the public who elected him. But they made the legislation so difficult, it's probably going to backfire on them, because they said you have to get 4 out of the 5 in order to remove him. And so, you know, that's a super duper majority. That's 80% of the board. They're also looking at models to expand the Board of Supervisor, which might make it more difficult also. So I understand why they did it, but the correct policy to put on the ballot would have been to make the county sheriff an appointed position.
Yeah, and I'm with you on Jackie Lacey. There was no district attorney that went after police before her going back to Vandy Camp.
Right.
You understand? I mean, I tried to do a recall on Vandy Camp over the Ron Settles case and couldn't get no traction. But on a Black woman, they could get traction because of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. And they were able to get Jackie Lacey out. I thought you could work with her personally.
I thought so too. And
And
she's a friend. And let me say this. I think they only did it to her because she was a Black woman, which was the problem that I had with Black Lives Matters. I said, okay, you guys wasn't up in here doing this to what was his name? Steve, what was
Cooley.
the one that
Cooley.
Yeah, y'all wasn't up in here doing that to Cooley. You know, y'all only did it. And she tried to meet with them. She said she made 2 attempts to meet with them and they shouted her down. And she said, so, you know, I have no problem meeting with them, but I'm not trying to be shouted down by 50 people, you know, and they don't want to talk with any degree of reason. And so I just thought that was a real mistake. I thought she had it the second time around, you know, but then her late husband, you know, when they showed up at her house at 5 a.m, you know, and he came out on the porch with a gun and told her to get off their porch. Now, these are supposed to be Afrocentrists, you know, these folk who, you know, claim that Black Lives Matter. They would know the history of showing up at a Black person's house in the middle of the night if they had any cultural sensitivity. That comes straight out of the South. You know, when somebody showed up at your house, if you didn't protect your house was either going to get burned down or you're going to get dragged out of your house and lynched. You know, so they should have had a greater sensitivity to that, but they performing for the cameras. You know, they TV activists, you know, and that I think that incident a week before election kind of gave you know, the emphasis to pull her under 50%. Because remember, she lost the primary by something like 49.7%, you know, percent. She got, you know, so she just got pulled under 50%, and then they was able to drag her from that point on.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing is the initiative defund the police, I think, was a bad political strategy. I think there should have been reform the police, or you know, or talk about the projects you want money to go to.
Yeah.
Because most Black people are pro-police.
Well, like we used to say back in the day, some people get caught up in their own rhetoric. And this is because if you recall, when they first sat down with Molina and them, they asked them, what does defund the police mean? And they couldn't give them an answer. They gave them like about 4 different answers. Okay. And so finally, you know, they arrived at a point of where, you know, we need to reimagine policing. Well, yeah, and we do need to redirect some of the resources. Well, yeah, you know, but if you really want to panic white people in the dominant population, talk about taking away police, you know, and yeah, that's not going to work out well for them.
All right, and that was Willard Murray that got rid of Compton Unified School District, put it in receivership. Willard Murray.
Willard Murray.
I was on the board there. The other thing is, when you come to voter suppression, I saw the brother in Georgia, the minister, Warner, did something nice. He had a rapper, and they drew out a lot of young people this past weekend. I thought that was good. How do we, I mean, voter suppression and redistricting, minority rule has been a practice of Europeans worldwide. I mean, there was a minority rule in South Africa, minority rule here and there, because they're the minority of the population in the world, but they had the major weapons. How do you see the voting rights bill and the countering of voter suppression in the South and even in LA?
Well, the South, they're dealing with a different politic than we are dealing with in California. It's the same, but it's different. California, they just sent everybody a ballot right to their mailbox. You know, so vote is not being suppressed, not being suppressed at all in California. People are just not voting because they don't have an incentive to vote. Now, California doesn't want to deal with some of the same issues as other folk. And that is largely dealing with the border issues. You know, all of the conversations about election fraud and election voter suppression tied directly back to the immigration problem. White folk don't trust that everybody who says they're a citizen is a citizen. Okay. Now, it's repressive to us because that's historically what they've done to us. And we can't sit back and watch them do to another ethnic minority what they used to do to us. So that puts us on pause. But that's essentially, you know, what that's about is that, you know, the South is saying in Texas, is saying either you're going to close the borders or we're not going to let everybody vote, or we're going to cry fraud, because they don't believe, particularly amongst the Latino population and the African American in Georgia, where they, decided to let, ex-felons and formerly convicted folk their voting rights back, because there were some states, including Florida, that if you gotten a conviction, you couldn't vote for life. California is not like that. If you're in prison or parole, you can't vote, but once you are released of supervision, you can vote. And just because you had a former conviction, you can vote. Now you have states, like Utah and Idaho, that let prisoners vote. So what makes the difference between, say, our state and those states is that the prison population is mostly white, and the prison population of California is mostly Black and brown. You're on mute. I can't hear you.
I'm got one more question, then I'm gonna let everyone else see if they have a question. If not, your closing statement. I don't want to keep you.
All right, I appreciate it. I committed to an hour.
The issue of the relevancy. Most Black people say we don't get nothing out of this anyway. When we vote, even if, like with Barack Obama, they say besides us galvanizing and feeling good, being able to say we got a Black president, when it came down to major issues, the Democratic Party wouldn't vote with him on. May have been DACA, may have been voters' rights. These were Democratic people that didn't. When they had the presidency, the Senate, and the Congress with Obama. With Obama. And so a lot of people got this well, not a lot of people, because there was a lot of first-time voters that didn't go back. But the point is that, how do you feel about that? I mean, that notion that we don't get nothing, even with these elections. I say we do, but what is your position?
Well, that's why, we have to transfer knowledge, and we have to take the time to educate young folk. Barack Obama passed the most significant piece of legislation in the 20th century, and that was the Affordable Care Act. And they fought him to tooth and nail on that. And when you look at the Affordable Care Act that they called Obamacare, you ask white folk, do they support Obamacare? And they would, in the majority poll no. But if you ask them if they enjoyed if they supported the Affordable Care Act, they would, in the majority, poll yes. The bottom line is them whites in West Virginia and Arkansas and Tennessee and Kentucky and in the Appalachians and Pennsylvania couldn't get health care because of pre-existing conditions. Okay. But who has the worst health care in America? Black people. Okay. And so you can't say he didn't do that for us. He passed the economic stimulus package. The money comes to the states. We didn't get what we should have of that because of the politics in the states. Folk are not prepared to do business with state government or local governments. Okay, but it comes down to Black folk wanting Barack to write them a check. Okay, and we may get a check one day. I believe our generation elected a Black president. The generation before us got us civil rights and voting rights. I think this next generation gonna get us reparations. But the bottom line is you have to know how government works. Now, really, our complaint is against private industry and unrestrained capitalism. We have seen in the last 30 years, wealth consolidation unlike we've ever seen. And then we finds ourselves going after other financial instruments that are not regulated. Black people got hurt when crypto crashed last week, okay? But to me, invisible money, invisible currency was bound to disappear one day, okay? And so what we use our elected officials and our influence, our political influence for, is to try to press on these banks and insurance companies to stop their redlining, stop their housing discrimination, stop, the wage suppression, those types of things where people can't live on an affordable wage, livable wage in California is $27 in Los Angeles County. So if you ain't making $27, you gotta an hour, you gotta work more than one job, to make ends meet, or you gotta live with someone. And so that's kind of where we got hurt, is we basically took our eye off what was once supposed to be structured or limited capitalism. Capitalism was never supposed to be unlimited. That's what Roosevelt went up against the industrialists on. And that's why millionaires at the turn of the 20th century was taxed 90% of their income to discourage wealth consolidation.
That was excellent.
Thank you.
Let's get to anybody else have any questions? Rahh, you still here?
Yes, I'm here.
I have a question.
Okay, sister, let's make it happen. Go ahead.
Yes. And again, thank you so much for this wealth of information, this great scholar, Griot, giving us great information. And I'm glad that, I kind of ended on some economics. I understand that's one of your specialties. And so just, given all this information in terms of, $27 an hour, livable wage, all this money being poured in. Well, where do you see us in this enemy, to our wealth, inflation? Kind of how are we going to make a plan to survive, or a solution?
Well, let me say this. When they wouldn't let us spend money with white folk, we had a solution. We spent money with ourselves. One of the things that I tell my students and the folk I lecture to is that we have to stop making excuses for our own dilemma. They want to talk about the Latino community taking their jobs, and they have impacted it. They have created competition, in which sometimes they drive down the wage until they get the job, and then they get in and they organize and they get the wage back up. But you don't see no brother selling socks and oranges on the side of the freeway. Mexicans don't take work, they make work. And Black people used to make work. We used to do everything that we had to do to sustain our communities. Now everybody wants to be an entertainer, just like everybody wanted to be an athlete when we was coming up, so I just think that we need to put a greater emphasis on not just self-help, but self-education. The one thing we do see in higher education taking place now is the rejection of a history that helped enslave us. They want to call it revisionist history, and we call it the truth. Much of the history that 3 generations of folk was taught was a false history. And so now you have academics, Black academics, Latino academics, Indigenous academics teaching their history as it was passed to them by their ancestors, and they have used their primary source material to back it. And it is very difficult for European scholars to refute it, And so by changing the curriculum and helping, our youth would take an interest in learning if they saw themselves in the curriculum, or if they saw themselves in the books. Okay. And so It's a matter of us helping them get there. Yes, we are old and there should be reparations. Okay, and we finally have a generation of elected officials that may tackle that subject. But the reality is, when is it going to come and what form is it going to come? And are we just going to sit back and wait for it to come? By that time, our communities would be totally gentrified and we wouldn't be able to buy back into the communities that we once held. So we just have to be a little smarter than that.
All right, good question.
Thank you.
All right, Sister Linda.
Yes, yes. And Dr. Samad, thank you.
Yes.
All I can say is wow, because I have learned a whole lot in an hour, and I appreciate it. It makes me want to know more. Where can I get one of your books? Because you missed a list of them.
Yeah. You could basically go to Amazon. I think Amazon has about 3 of them. 2 of them are out of print. So I know you can get Souls for Sale and 50 Years After Brown, and you may be able to get some copies of Realize, but Saving the Race is out of print.
Okay.
Mhm.
But go on Amazon first of all.
Yeah, Amazon, and you just put in Anthony Assadollah Samad.
Sure will. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Brother Hembrick. Big Joe. Okay. All right, Mashinda. Are you there, Mashinda? I don't know what happened to him. All right, look, Doc. Rashaki.
Yes.
Okay, I will send you a picture of Dr. Rashad. Any closing remarks, Dr. Samad?
I just appreciate platforms like this, brothers and sisters, scholars and thinkers getting together and cutting it up. I think that is an important way to dissect what's going on in our communities, in our schools, in our government. And so I commend you all for getting together on a regular basis and doing this. And also inviting young people in to be part of the conversation.
All right, thank you, Dr. Samad. Rashaki, you want to tell them what's going on next week? Oh, Wednesday?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Samad. Appreciate it. And we do have a very young person coming on. I'm going to interview my grandson
Okay.
on Wednesday, a 9-year-old.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's going to be interesting. So I'm looking forward to that. His name is Ras Kassim Maskani. That's a given name by me. So yeah, his name is William. So we're gonna have fun on Wednesday with him.
That's beautiful.
Little sharp guy.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Well, that's what we got going on Wednesday, Professor Rahh.
All right, that's on community education.
The CEN show.
The CEN show.
Yes.
And Dr. Samad, I want to tell you, you've always been one of the strongest and most profound leaders. And what I love about you, you speak truth to the people and you speak truth to the power. I mean, you're the one that I always talk about holding politicians accountable. You led that struggle, so we deeply appreciate it. And we just want to say, as we say in Kauai, the grains of sand are few in comparison on the ocean floor, in comparison to the many thanks we thank you for being here. And I'm gonna come by the Institute. You got my email.
I
So
did.
you're gonna let me know when y'all have a forum. But I just want to come by and just talk to you and things of that nature and bring some of my momentum with Merv Diamond.
Okay.
All
right. We'd love to do it.
All right then, brother. So thank you again.
All right.
And this will be on YouTube.
Sisters, thank you very much.
This will be on YouTube. And I'm gonna send him a picture of you.
Okay.
But it'll be under the Conscious Corner YouTube and this presentation, in case some of your students or anybody else want to hear what you discuss. All right. You can recommend them. All right, then.
All right. Good night, my brothers and sisters. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right, King.
All right.
Roger, I got that up. We can use that picture with him saying power to the people.
Okay. All right. So everybody have a good evening. Conscious Corner. Each one teach one.
All right. Yeah.